There was something about the way the sun slanted through the trees, warm and golden, that made everything feel different. Or maybe it was just me. I glanced at Ethan, my stepbrother, as he tossed the last of our bags into the trunk. He looked effortlessly put together, even in a faded t-shirt and cargo shorts, like he belonged out here in the middle of nowhere. We hadn't spent much time alone together before. Family gatherings were always filled with other people, other conversations. But this trip was just us. A bonding experience, Mom had called it. Ethan wiped the back of his hand across his forehead and caught me looking. "What?" he asked, smirking. "Nothing," I said quickly, shoving my hands into my hoodie pockets. "Just surprised you actually got all that to fit." He leaned against the car, stretching, muscles flexing beneath his shirt. "I'm good with my hands." I rolled my eyes, but my throat felt a little dry. He had this way of saying things that sounded completely normal, but hit differently when it came from him. Maybe I was reading into it. We piled into the car. The The sky had been a bright, cloudless blue when we started our hike that morning. Now it was a deep, rolling gray, the kind that meant trouble. Ethan pulled out his phone, checking the signal for the third time in the past 5 minutes. Nothing. I adjusted the straps of my backpack, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. We should head back. Ethan looked up at the sky, lips pressing together in thought. Yeah, we should have done that 20 minutes ago. A gust of wind cut through the trees, and a low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. The trail we had followed so confidently earlier now felt unfamiliar, the trees stretching high above us, closing in. I swallowed. You do know where we're going, right? Ethan shot me a look. Yes, I know where we're going. Then, after a pause, mostly, I groaned. Great. We're gonna die out here. He rolled his eyes but grabbed my wrist, tugging me. Forward. We're not dying. There's a ranger cabin about half a mile from here. We'll wait the storm out there. I didn't argue. The first fat drops of rain had already started falling, and within minutes, the dirt beneath our feet turned into slick mud. By the time we reached the cabin, we were drenched. The wooden structure was small, barely more than a shelter with a few old supplies and a single cot in the corner. But it was dry, and right now, that was enough. Ethan shut the door behind us, shaking his head like a wet dog, sending droplets everywhere. Dude, I groaned, wiping my face. He smirked. You're already soaked. What's a little more? Peeled off my hoodie, which clung to me uncomfortably, leaving me in just a damp t-shirt. Ethan did the same, tossing his shirt over the back of a wooden chair. I tried not to stare. I really, really tried. But Ethan was all lean muscle and tanned, skin, and his hair was messy from the rain, dripping onto his collarbone. He rubbed at his arms, trying to shake off the chill, and that's when I noticed the goosebumps prickling his skin. You're freezing, I blurted before I could think better of it. Ethan gave a half shrug. I'll live. I hesitated. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed the old, slightly dusty blanket from the cot and threw it at him. He caught it, one brow arching. Look at you, being all thoughtful? Shut up, I muttered, crossing my arms to fight off my own shiver. Ethan's smirk softened. He held out a corner of the blanket. Come here. I blinked. What? You're cold, too. He patted the space beside him on the cot. Come on, I won't bite. This was a bad idea. A really, really bad idea. But my body moved before my brain could argue. I sat next to him, stiff and careful, but Ethan just tugged the blanket around both of us, his arm resting against mine, warm despite the chill. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain drummed steadily against the roof, the air thick with the scent of damp wood, and something distinctly Ethan. Soap, rain, warmth. This is cozy, he murmured, tilting his head slightly toward me. His voice had that teasing edge, but it was quieter this time, almost thoughtful. I let out a breath that I didn't know I had been holding. Yeah, silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt charged, like something was waiting just beneath the surface. Then, Ethan shifted. Just a small movement, his knee brushing against mine, his fingers barely grazing my wrist where it rested on my lap. Accidental? Maybe. I didn't move away. Neither did he. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my breath uneven, and I hated how obvious it probably was. But when I glanced at him, he was already looking at me, not teasing, not amused, just watching. His gaze flickered down to my mouth, then back up. My stomach flipped. "Ethan!" The thunder cracked outside, loud and sudden, making me jolt slightly. Ethan let out a small chuckle, but it was different from his usual carefree laughter. Lower, softer. "Relax," he murmured. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one overthinking every single second of this. His fingers still barely touching. Mine curled slightly, like he was testing something, like he was waiting for me to pull away. I didn't, and that changed everything. The rain outside didn't let up. If anything, it grew heavier, a steady drum against the cabin roof. Inside, the air felt too thick, too charged, like something unspoken was pressing against the walls, waiting to break free. Ethan hadn't moved away, not when our arms touched, not when his fingers, barely brushing against mine under the blanket, curled slightly. Tentative, testing. I should have pulled back. I didn't. Instead, I swallowed, my pulse hammering against my ribs, and turned slightly toward him. The dim lantern light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp cut of his jaw, the damp strands of hair sticking to his forehead. But it was his eyes that had me trapped. He was looking at me, not in the usual teasing way, not with the amused smirk he always wore when he was pushing my buttons. This was different. I started, then immediately stopped. My throat, too tight. Ethan's head tilted slightly, his gaze flickering down to my lips, then back up. My stomach flipped. I needed to say something, anything, but my thoughts were tangled, a mess of what-ifs and maybes, and the steady, insistent realization that I had wanted this, him, for longer than I'd ever let myself admit. I exhaled shakily. Ethan. His name felt different on my tongue, heavier somehow. He didn't answer right away. Just let the silence stretch, watching me like he was waiting for something. Then, quietly, "You're shaking." It wasn't from the cold. I tried to force a laugh, something light, something that would make this moment less terrifying. "Yeah, well, getting caught in a storm wasn't exactly part of the plan." Ethan's lips twitched, but his usual smirk never came. Instead, his fingers shifted against mine. Deliberate this time. A barely there touch, but it sent a shiver down my spine. I could have ignored it, could have laughed it off, could have pretended like my heart wasn't currently attempting to beat its way out of my chest. But I was tired of pretending. "I don't get you," I murmured, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Ethan's brows furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" I licked my lips, trying to find the right words. "This. You. You act like." I hesitated, then shook my head. Never mind. Forget it. Ethan didn't let me. "No," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Say it." I exhaled, dragging a hand through my damp hair. "You act like you don't care about anything, but then you do stuff like this." I gestured vaguely between us, my fingers still trapped beneath his. "Like you—" I stopped again, frustrated at my own inability to get the words out. Ethan didn't speak right away. His thumb brushed over the back of my hand, slow, like he was thinking. "I do care," he admitted after a long pause. Something in my chest tightened. "Yeah?" His lips pressed together for a beat. Then, almost reluctantly, "Yeah." I let out a breath. "Then why do you act like it's nothing?" Ethan's jaw tightened, and for the first time he looked away. "Because it's easier." The answer shouldn't have made my stomach flip the way it did. But it did. I swallowed. Easier than what? His fingers tightened slightly around mine like he was steadying himself. When he finally looked back at me, his expression was unreadable, but there was something raw in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. Easier than wanting something. I'm not supposed to. My breath caught. The words hung between us, heavy and impossible to take back. Ethan let out a rough breath, dragging his free hand down his face. "Shit," he muttered under his breath. I didn't mean—" He cut himself off, shaking his head. But I had heard him. I had heard him. And now my entire world had tilted on its axis. "Say it again," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan hesitated. "Say it." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Then, so quiet, I almost didn't hear it. "I want you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, all I could do was stare at him, my heart pounding. So hard I was sure he could hear it. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Ethan shook his head, letting out a humorless laugh. "See? This is why I don't—" I kissed him. I didn't think. Didn't second guess. I just leaned forward and kissed him. For a split second, he froze. Then, all at once, he melted into it. His hand slid up, cupping the side of my face, his fingers tangling in my still damp hair. He was warm, solid, real. The kiss was hesitant at first, careful, like we were both afraid of breaking whatever fragile thing had just formed between us. Then he exhaled against my lips, and something in me snapped. I pressed closer, my hands gripping his shoulders, his skin warm beneath my fingertips. He made a small noise in the back of his throat. Surprised, maybe, and it sent a shiver straight down my spine. When we finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, the air between us charged with something electric, something that had been there for longer than either of us had admitted. Ethan's forehead rested against mine. "Okay," he breathed, his lips curving slightly. "Wasn't expecting that." I let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, me neither." A beat of silence. Then, quieter. "You mean it?" he asked, like he wasn't sure he could trust this. "Trust me." I nodded, my fingers still curled around his arm. "Yeah." Ethan let out a slow breath, his grip tightening on me like he was afraid I'd disappear. "Well," he murmured, his voice lower now, warmer. "Guess we're stuck in here for a while." Something in his tone sent a shiver down. The rain was still falling, steady and relentless, but inside the cabin, everything had changed. Ethan was still close, closer than he'd ever been before. His forehead rested against mine, his breath warm against my skin, and neither of us made a move to pull away. I didn't want to. I didn't think he did either. "Well," he murmured after a moment, his voice rough but laced with something lighter, something almost amused. "That happened." I let out a breathless laugh, my heart still hammering. "Yeah, that definitely happened." His fingers were still tangled in my hair, his thumb brushing absently over my temple. It was such a small thing, but it made my chest tighten. Like he didn't just want this, he wanted to hold onto it. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt like a space where words didn't need to exist. But eventually, I had to break it. I pulled back just enough to look at him, my fingers still curled in the fabric of his shirt. "Ethan!" He met my gaze, his expression unreadable, but his eyes soft. Waiting. I swallowed. "So, what now?" His lips twitched. "Well, Usually, after you kiss someone, you take them out to dinner. Maybe hold their hand. Pretend to be smooth. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't fight the grin tugging at my lips. That's not what I meant. I know, he admitted, his voice quieter now. And I don't know. That answer should have made me uneasy, but it didn't. Because the way he was looking at me, like he had just discovered something he didn't want to lose, was enough. I nodded slowly. Okay. Ethan let out a breath, his fingers tightening against mine. Okay? I shrugged. We don't have to figure it all out right now. His brows lifted slightly like he hadn't expected that. Yeah? I huffed, a laugh. Yeah, I gestured around us. I mean, we're literally stuck in the middle of nowhere with no cell service, no way to leave until the storm passes. We've got time. Ethan smirked, but it was softer than usual. You're weirdly chill about this. I wasn't. Not really. But I also wasn't willing to let doubt ruin the one thing I'd wanted for longer than I cared to admit. I gave him a small smile. Just trying not to scare you off. Ethan snorted. Too late for that. Then quieter. I don't think I'm going anywhere. Something in his voice made my stomach flip. I exhaled, shaking my head. You really are the worst at talking about feelings. Ethan let out a dramatic sigh. Yeah, I know. But in my defense... He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping as his lips brushed the corner of my mouth. I'm pretty good at showing them. My breath caught, my fingers digging into his shirt. Yeah? I murmured. He hummed, pressing a slow, lingering kiss against my jaw. Yeah, I was going to kill him. Or kiss him again. Possibly both. I let out a shaky laugh, nudging him back slightly. You're such a pain. Ethan grinned, entirely unbothered. But you like me anyway. I rolled my eyes, but my face was warm. Yeah, I admitted. I really do. He exhaled, something almost like relief flashing across his face, before he let his forehead drop against my shoulder. I let my hand slip into his hair, fingers threading through the damp strands, and we just stayed like that for a moment. The storm still raged outside. The world hadn't changed, but between us, everything had. Why before? The storm had finally passed. The morning light filtered through the trees, turning the damp leaves into something golden, something alive. The air smelled clean, fresh like the world had been washed new. I stood outside the cabin, stretching, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. Ethan was behind me, leaning against the doorway, hands stuffed into his hoodie pocket. His gaze wasn't on the view, though. It was on me. It had been like that since last night. Since everything changed. Turned to him and he didn't look away. What? I asked, trying for casual, even as my heart did that ridiculous, traitorous thing where it picked up just from the way he looked at me. Ethan smirked, but it was softer than usual. You're staring at the sunrise like it means something. I huffed a laugh. Maybe it does. He stepped down from the cabin's porch, moving closer, slow and easy, like we had all the time in the world. I wanted to believe that we did. I shoved my hands into my pockets, watching him. So, Ethan tilted his head. So, I exhaled. We should probably talk about... He reached over, hooking a finger around my hoodie drawstring and tugging lightly. Yeah, we probably should. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't heavy. If anything, it felt good. Like we weren't rushing. Like we were just here, Figuring it out. Together. I bit my lip. You scared? Ethan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. A little. Honest. I appreciated that. Me too, I admitted. He let out a breath of laughter, glancing down before meeting my gaze again. Okay. That makes it less terrifying. I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. Good. Ethan shifted, reaching out like he was going to touch my hand, but hesitating. I caught his fingers before he could pull back. His shoulders relaxed. Slightly, like he'd been bracing for something else. Like he hadn't expected this to be okay. I squeezed his hand. We don't have to figure everything out right now. Ethan nodded slowly, his thumb brushing absently against my palm. I do know one thing, though. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah? He tugged me forward. Not much, just enough to close the last inch between us. I'm not gonna pretend last night didn't happen. My breath hitched. Ethan searched my face, his voice softer now. And I don't want to go back to how things were before. Something in me eased at that. Some knot of tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I swallowed, tilting my head slightly. So, what do you want? Ethan let out a slow breath. You. I blinked. He huffed a laugh, shaking his head. God, that was cheesy. I grinned. So bad. Ethan groaned, but he was smiling too. Forget I said anything. Not a chance. He rolled his eyes, but didn't let go of my hand. Didn't step back. The moment lingered, stretching between us like something fragile but unbreakable. I squeezed his fingers. I want you too, you know. Ethan's breath stuttered slightly, but then he nodded, like he'd already known, or maybe just needed to hear it anyway. I exhaled, glancing out at the trees, the damp earth, the sky that had finally cleared. So, what now? Ethan smirked, tugging me toward him just a little. Well, we go back to real life. Try to figure this out. I raised an eyebrow. That's it? He hummed thoughtfully. Also, I take you on a proper date. I laughed. That's important? Obviously. He gave a mock-serious nod. I have to impress you. I grinned, my stomach flipping in a way I wasn't sure I'd ever get used to. I think you already did. Ethan's smirk faltered just slightly, his face softening, his fingers tightening around mine. Yeah. Maybe we didn't have everything figured out. Maybe there were things we'd still have to face. But right now, I had him. And that was enough.